welcome to this space. My name is Gina, and although I normally do sort of traditional podcasts where I talk to you about what I've been up to with my knitting, in this video series, I am going to be talking about test knitting. It seems like test knitting is sort of a frequent topic of conversation on the internet, with people sort of wondering why anybody wants to test knit. It seems sometimes like there's confusion around what test knitting even is. And there are definitely conversations about what constitute good test knitting practices on both the side of the designer and the side of the tester. So I am a very experienced test knitter, and so I thought I would put together this video series sort of talking about like what is test knitting, why might you apply for those tests, what is involved in it, how do you become a test knitter, and then my own take on what are best practices, what to look for in a testing call, in a designer. And then at the end of the series, I'm going to do my controversial opinions on test knitting. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, I hope that you will follow along. So this will be the first of 5 videos about test knitting. In this first video, I want to talk to you about why I like to test knit, because that is definitely a question that people have. I guess before I launch into that, I should tell you that I have been knitting for, I think this is my 12th year that I'm working through. I have been test knitting for at least 8 years of that. I went back and looked on Ravelry, and I've definitely done over 100 tests, but I think it's closer to, I think it's actually like over 120, but I didn't want to dig through all of my projects to make absolutely sure of that. So let's just leave it at over 100 test knit. So I'm a pretty experienced test knitter. Okay, so a question that comes up a lot is, why would anybody want to test knit? And this typically seems to come from people who have tried test knitting and haven't enjoyed it, or people who haven't tried it yet, but just think that it's not for them. And I'm not trying to convince anybody, please understand that, of like why they should test knit. That is not what this is about. This is just trying to explain like what's in it, what's in it for me. What do I get out of it? Because sort of the anti-test knitting group seems to say, you know, their argument seems to be like, you're putting in many hours of knitting work on a pattern that is untested, unproven, and you're using your own yarn, which can run from, it can run a lot of money depending on what yarn you choose. I will say for me personally, I am a sale purchaser, and I usually keep yarn quantities on hand so that I'm able to do this. Actually, I'm going to talk about that in a minute as one of my reasons, but there's definitely a cost associated with test knitting, right? You have to outlay in one way or another the yarn purchase for the test knit. So why would anybody want to do that? So this is just my personal reasons, what I am getting out of it, why I keep going back to test for various designers. And if you see me looking down, I have my iPad, got a lot of notes on here. So let's see, why do I test knit? So a few months ago, I was thinking about this and really asking myself, because I will go through cycles where I do a lot of test knitting, and then I'll realize that, I've been doing like only test knits and not working on my own queue that I have set up of patterns that I want to make. And so I'll like swear off test knitting for a while, take a break from it, and then I will come back. And so, I was sort of asking myself, like, why do I do this? Why do I get into these cycles where I am constantly doing test knits? And I will say I'm in one of those right now. I've been doing a lot of test knits recently. And I think the answer is that it, takes off a lot of pressure about having to make a decision. I get decision paralysis when I look at my queue that's like 4 pages deep on Ravelry, over 100 things that I have in there that I want to make. Deciding which one I want to do first, which one do I want to work on, can be overwhelming. What are you doing? Sorry about that. Had to let my cat out. So let's see, what was I saying? Yeah, it just gets overwhelming to make that decision. And so in times when I'm really stressed in other parts of my life, I feel like I will sign up for a lot of test knits because that way the decision is made for me. Once I'm accepted to a test knit, then I'm committed to it and I have to make it. So there's just, I can't explain why for, my brain that feels better. Because I'm still making a choice, right? I'm making a choice to apply to a test knit, but somehow that feels better to me, more comfortable than just making the choice of what to knit from my queue. It's possible also that, I do think that there is a dopamine hit that comes from being chosen to participate in a test knit. And so that might be playing into it as well. Again, this is just Gina's personal psychology here, like what I think is at work a lot of times. But there are a lot of other good things that I appreciate about test knitting. And so one of those is that I respond really well to a deadline. I know that's obviously different for a lot of people, but I really like to have a deadline. I am very goal oriented when it comes to my knitting. I do enjoy the process of knitting, and I would be knitting even if I had to just turn around and tear it back out, because I just find the motions and the process of knitting to be very soothing. But I would say that I am more of a project, end goal sort of knitter. So I'm definitely looking for that dopamine hit that comes when I have completed a project, and I love to wear it. So I'm not one of those people who knits things and never wears them. I love to wear my knits. I'm always so excited when I have something, fresh off the needles that I can add to my wardrobe. So the deadlines are a big part of it for me, a big part of the appeal. And again, I know I could set my own deadlines for all of those projects in my queue, but it just isn't the same. I don't know. I don't respond in the same way to setting deadlines for myself. All right. Then the second thing that I think is really valuable about test knitting is that you get to have a little make-along experience. There's going to be a community of test knitters who are also working on that pattern. And I should say here, I'm primarily test knitting garments. So at least at the stage, earlier on, I test knitted more accessories and stuff. And so generally designers try to get at least 1, if not 2 to 3 knitters per size. So there are usually going to be, quite a few knitters who are participating in a given test with you. And it's just really fun to see what other people are doing. I love seeing other people's colors and how it's working up. Obviously you can ask questions, and just there's a lot of camaraderie that can develop in those test knitting groups. So I think that's a really valuable part of it. And number 3, it is, and I think this is number 3, but it's a really important one. And it is a way to support designers whose work I really admire. This is, a lot of people complain about, test knitters not being compensated for their work. And I'll talk about in my controversial opinions video at the end why that isn't an issue for me. But I feel like this test knitting is a way that I am giving back to the knitting community as a whole, and specifically I am giving back and supporting designers whose work I enjoy. And for me, that's important. Obviously I can support them with my money, but if you can't afford to buy every new pattern a designer puts out, this is something that you could do to help them. So yeah, I think that this is an important thing. And number 4 is sometimes I just can't wait to work on a design. So every once in a while, a designer will, tease a design that they have been working on. One of the designers that I like to test knit for, Michelle Frazetta of Mishi Fraz Knits, she has a podcast, and so she shows like what she's working on. And as I watch those things develop, sometimes I like get really excited about the idea of them, and I just don't want to wait until the pattern is actually released. I want to be in that first wave of people trying out the pattern. And it's funny because I would say that I'm not really like that, and the rest of my life do not tend to be like an early adopter, if you will, but I do enjoy that in knitting. So yeah, it's just a way that you can just jump on that hype of something that you're really excited about in the first wave of people who are doing it. And then 5th, I, in my previous life, spent some time as a professional copy editor, and in my everyday life, am a teacher and work with people on their writing to make it better. And so I just enjoy looking, I notice errors as somebody who's been trained in that area. And so if I can give that feedback to somebody and help them to clean up their pattern, make it a little bit more reader friendly, then that brings me satisfaction. I enjoy doing that. I'm a weirdo who enjoys, fixing punctuation, grammar mechanics, and pattern editing kind of scratches that itch for me. So yeah, again, that probably doesn't apply to most people because I realize grammar and mechanics are not something that most people enjoy working on, but I'm a weirdo and I do. And then lastly, one of the things that test knitting does is help me think about how I can use things in my stash. So as I mentioned earlier, I tend to be a shopper of sales, and because I'm always looking for how can I make a garment that I like, but that also does not cost me $300 to make, because I just do not have that kind of money to put on into a garment. So I am a budget shopper, and I will shop those sales. And so I tend to buy like a sweater quantity of yarn when it's really on sale, and it will just be, like a generic sweater quantity. And so I have, a number of those available to me. And so then when I get accepted into a test knit, I have to get creative and think about which of these, stashed yarn bags am I going to get into, what will work for this. And yeah, so it helps me, it just helps me to think creatively about my stash and how I am going to use it up. So I am making progress on stashing down. That's not something that I'm actively like working on necessarily. I just need to, be working from stash whenever I can. So yeah, so that's another biggie for me. So yeah, those are my main reasons why I personally enjoy test knitting and keep coming back to it over and over again. And so next up, in the next video, what I will be discussing is defining test knitting in quite some depth, and exploring what it is that a test knitter does, what are the expectations. So obviously that is definitely going to be geared towards people who haven't engaged in test knitting before, or just curious about what it is and whether it might be for them. So if you think that you would be interested in that, I hope that you will click subscribe and watch that next video when it releases. Thanks for hanging out with me. Bye.